I'm glad you all were able to come inside, even though it's a beautiful day outside. Good day for golf. Well, hello. My name is Matt Waller. I am the interim dean of the Sam M. Walton College of Business at the University of Arkansas, and it is my honor to welcome all of you to the 2016 Business Forecast Luncheon. I think that feedback was intentional, that's my guess. The Walton College is a place that continues to create innovative ideas to grow the economy of Arkansas, the nation, and the world. We do that through world-class teaching and research in dynamic areas such as entrepreneurship, data analytics, retail, supply chain management, and global business. And through projects such as the recently announced Macmillan Retail Innovation and Technology Lab on the university campus. That's worth clapping about. It's the first of its kind in the world, and it's going to enable our students to learn about integrating digital and physical for the changes that are coming in shopping and retail and order fulfillment. In 2015, Pika Solar, a startup solar power company that grew out of an entrepreneurship team coached by Professor Carol Reeves, received a prestigious Edison Award, which honors innovation and innovators. We prepare our students for the real world through classroom offerings such as the undergraduate portfolio management class, which I know many of you have been through, where students apply modern investment theory to the practical management of approximately $1.1 million. These are just a few examples of how Walton is working to ensure that our students and all of Arkansas stay at the forefront of innovative global and digital ideas in business. Our graduates occupy more than 30 C-suite offices at Fortune 500 companies, and 4 of them are CEOs in those Fortune 500 companies. Our accounting department is ranked 26th in research worldwide, and our Department of Supply Chain Management is ranked 5th worldwide in research. And there's many, many more examples of how the Walton College is helping to drive Arkansas's economy forward. Today's event is hosted by the Walton College Center for Business and Economic Research and is offered in conjunction with the National Association of Business Economics. I extend a warm welcome to each of you, and given our time constraints, I would encourage each of you to begin eating now so that you'll be able to hear all of the words of our panelists. Also, please silence your cell phones as they may interfere with the sound system, but feel free to use your smartphones and tweet about this event. Please use the hashtag BF2016. That's B as in business, F as in forecast 2016 when referring to this event in your tweets. We would like to thank Marianne Greenwood for her assistance in securing this year's speakers and for her unwavering support of this program and the Walton College. Marianne is a good friend of the University of Arkansas and provides invaluable service to the Arkansas business community. Let's give Marianne a hand. We have many distinguished guests with us today. I would particularly like to recognize the 2016 Business Forecast sponsors. This program wouldn't be possible without the generosity of so many corporations and individuals. The proceeds of this event will go to support the outreach efforts of the Walton College's Center for Business and Economic Research. All sponsored tables have the names and logos on signs on the table. Now, would each of the representatives of those sponsors stand as I call you the name of your company? Please remain standing and hold your applause. Please remain standing and hold your applause until all sponsors have been recognized. The Walton presenting partner is Walmart and Sam's Club. We appreciate their longtime support and generosity for this program. The Walton academic partners include the Center for Retailing Excellence, Greenwood Gerhardt and Associates. Our Walton corporate partners are Dillard's, Frost PLLC, Reese-Moore Pendergraft LLP, Smith Hurst PLC, and Tyson Foods Incorporated. So stand as we call your names. Walton business partners are represented by AEP Southwestern Electric Power Company, Friday Elridge Clark LLP, Hogan Taylor LLP, J.B. Hunt Transport Services LLP, McKee Foods, Regions Bank, Regions Insurance, the City of West Memphis, and Wright, Lindsay & Jennings LLP. We appreciate our Walton media partners, Celebrate Arkansas, the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette, Talk Business and Politics. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making this event a success for 22 years running. Several of our sponsors have also made it possible for over 30 of our Walton College students and 15 Springdale High School students to join us and attend the luncheon today. Students, would you please stand and be recognized? We're so glad that you can experience this kind of event firsthand. Students, over here. Thank you. We're also pleased to welcome U.S. Congressman Steve Womack and U.S. Senator John Bozeman and staff, U.S. Senator Tom Cotton's offices. Thank you for coming. Arkansas Secretary of State Mark Martin is also joining us today. We will welcome many mayors, city council members, and county judges from communities throughout the state as well. We also have Mike Peterson, Executive Director of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, along with a number of staff members from the commission with us today. Thank you for coming. I'm also pleased that we have a number of former Business Forecast Luncheon speakers and moderators in attendance. Many of you will remember John James, Javier Reyes, Tim Yeager, Kevin Stevenson, Robert Hopkins from the past years. Welcome back. I would also like to welcome the many Walton College and University of Arkansas faculty and staff members here today. Would all of the University of Arkansas faculty and staff stand and be recognized? Thank you. I'm particularly pleased that Chancellor Joseph Steinmetz can be with us today. The Chancellor is going to offer his own welcome. Please welcome the new University of Arkansas Chancellor, Joseph Steinmetz, to the stage.
Thank you, Matt, and I certainly offer my best wishes and welcome as well. It's a real pleasure to be here. And in fact, I'm struck by the pleasant weather here. I think as many of you know, I moved here just a month or so ago, and the poor people up in Columbus, Ohio are cold and snowy. And so I'm happy to report to them that isn't the case here. I was told when I first came here what a big event this was every year, and I'm really impressed with today's turnout. But I want to tell you, I think this is a bigger deal than I was even told about. It's wonderful to see such great interest here. And I think above all, I think it speaks highly of the reputation of the Sam M. Walton College of Business, as well to the depth and the quality of research that goes on in the college there. Not only is the college conducting world-class research, but we're drawing some of the best students in the world from around the state as well to see this campus. And these students are indeed our future. As I settle into my new role as the Chancellor of the University of Arkansas, I take comfort in knowing that the Walton College is in our campus producing great research and scholarship on a daily basis. And I want to add one other thing, and that's to say is that an important part of our University of Arkansas is the outreach mission we have as a land-grant institution. And I think this is a wonderful example of that outreach that I hope we see much more as the years go by. I also want to recognize Kathy Deck and her colleagues at the Center for Business and Economic Research for their work in coordinating this event. It's a big job, and it's done really well. So please help me join me. Thank you. The size, the popularity, and the longevity of this luncheon reflects the quality of the data analysis that's actually done and the insight being offered to the business community over these last 22 years. I know I'm as eager as you are to hear today's forecasters and what they anticipate for the year ahead. And I think while we all want to hear a very positive message and a positive forecast, I think what we really need to hear is the most accurate forecast possibly. And with that said, I'm sure the best analysis of the data that's available has been done. I think we'll get some valuable insights here today. Before I go, I want to make sure I thank the sponsors. We appreciate your support for this event and for all you do for the university as you're constantly helping us out. I also want to take time to acknowledge and to thank our speakers and the panelists joining Kathy, Bill Dillard, Michael Drury, and Kevin Gleason. Thank you. Thank you for coming here today. And it's like all here, I'm looking forward to hearing the views of the panel about the coming year as well as the discussion that follows. So let's have a great lunch, and let's hope for a little sunshine in this forecast that matches the sunshine outside. So thank you very much.
Once again, I welcome everyone to the Business Forecast Luncheon, and thank you all. Now, on to the business of forecasting. Each year at this luncheon, we ask attendees to make their predictions of key economic indicators for the coming year. How well did you do? To announce last year's most accurate forecaster and to give special appreciation, I would like to introduce Kathy Deck, Director of the Walton College's Center for Business and Economic Research.
Thank you, Matt. I didn't do that. Good afternoon, actually I was going to say good morning, everyone. We have just a couple more minutes while it's still morning. As you know, if you are a longtime attendee, each year at the Business Forecast Luncheon, we invite you to forecast the values of 15 economic indicators for the coming year. These variables include the growth of real GDP, interest rates, unemployment rates, and some commodity prices, the Dow Jones Industrial Average. We then give awards to the top 3 best overall forecasters and another to the best forecaster of the Dow. As you may have noticed, this January has not been a happy time for the Dow, but keep in mind the forecast that we're looking at was how the Dow ended at the end of 2015, which doesn't include what's happened so far in January. Over 125 of you participated last year. I hope with almost 1,000 of you here this year that many more of you will put your names into the ring. I want to talk about the best Dow Jones Industrial Average forecaster first. Our contest participants produced a consensus forecast last year that the Dow would be almost flat with just 0.5% growth at the end of 2015. In fact, the Dow fell by 2.2% at the end of 2015, ending at 17,425. We had a number of very, very close forecast among our contest participants, but I want to suggest to anyone sitting nearby Georgette Ferris from Staffmark that you take her aside, because this is in fact the second time she has won the Best Dow Forecaster Award. So Georgette, if you would please come up, we would be happy to award that to you. Before I turn to the overall economic forecasting awards, I want to take a minute and remember a very special friend of the Business Forecast Luncheon. Dan Grubb, who died 2 years ago, was among the people who pushed for the inception of this event 22 years ago. He talked to our dean at the time and said that Northwest Arkansas was the perfect place to hold this kind of an event. And so for our overall best forecaster, we have named that award in his honor. What's interesting about Dan is he even won the event once. So he was certainly involved at every single level. Can I please get a round of applause in memory of Dan's important contributions to Northwest Arkansas? So winners, please come forward to accept your award when I call your name. Who were the folks who believed that we'd keep chugging along? Our third place forecaster was a mentor of Dan Grubb's and also very involved in getting our Business Forecast Luncheon started. He is former University of Arkansas Board of Trustee member Charles Charlau. Charles, please come forward if you can. Our second place forecaster, I got an email from actually this morning saying that he wasn't going to be able to join us, but his name is Mike Salem, and he's from Isokinetics Incorporated. We will make sure to get Mike his award for his second place finish. And the top spot, the Dan B. Grubb Forecasting Award, goes to Jody Brown from the 1886 Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs. Jody, please come forward, and everyone, please help me congratulate Jody, Mike, Charles, and Georgette on receiving their awards. Thank you. There you go. I kept the secret last night. Yeah. Congratulations to all of our winners, and please let me remind you to fill out this year's contest form. You have to fill out all 15 economic variables to be eligible to win the overall forecaster. We also have an event evaluation on the other side of the forecast page, so please do fill out the evaluation form and let us know how we're doing with your email address and your contact information. Thank you very much, and I hope good luck to you all who forecast for the next year.
Congratulations to all of you. Please find the form for next year's contest on your table and remember to complete it. Also, please fill out the evaluation sheet for today's program. You may leave both at your table when you're finished. It is now my pleasure to introduce the moderator of this event today. Bill Dillard III is Vice President at Dillard's, based in Little Rock, Arkansas, with responsibility for the beauty, home, and accessories of the business. He is entering his 22nd year in the retail fashion industry. Since joining Dillard's in 1994, he's served in several areas, including selling management, buying, product, and merchandising. He's also lived and worked in Hong Kong, working directly with overseas manufacturers as an agent for fashion retailers. He serves on the boards of East-Stem Public Charter Schools, Arkansas for Education Reform Foundation, St. Vincent Health Systems, Young Life, and Search Ministries. Mr. Dillard received his bachelor's degree from the University of Texas, Austin, and also received a master's degree in business administration from the J.L. Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University. Welcome, please, our moderator, Bill Dillard III.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here. Is that really loud? Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you. And so I'm going to kind of set up today real quick, tell you how it's going to work. We've got 3 speakers. They're going to discuss, wonderful speakers, by the way. We're going to discuss the global economy, the domestic economy, and then last but not least, the Arkansas economy. And I think it's going to be riveting. After that, we're going to have a short panel discussion. You guys have the opportunity during that to ask questions, and please do. We would encourage you to do that. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. You know, I really think this is a fascinating time to be having this event. I think we're in an unprecedented set of circumstances, and what a tricky, daunting task it is to try and forecast what we expect to see right now. It actually makes one wonder, why did God create economists in the first place? Does anybody know? To make weather forecasters look good. So what are we seeing right now, quickly, domestically? We have low unemployment, but weak job participation. We not only have no real inflation, but deflation in several sectors. We have job growth, yet minimal wage growth, and resulting lower household incomes. We have good housing growth, yet manufacturing contraction. We have low energy prices and consumer confidence up, yet Macy's and others are closing stores because of anemic consumer spending. It feels like we're in a maze almost, contradictory, a little bit illogical. And in September, Fed Chairwoman Janet Yellen acknowledged, quote, significant uncertainty about their predictions, and that, quote, conventional models have become a subject of controversy. Here's the leader of our Fed admitting that they really don't know what's going to happen. Could it be that the massive stimulus and subsequent debt levels and the zero interest rate policies that we've all enjoyed since post-2007 have had innumerable consequences, not all of which the central bankers intended or anticipated? Has the credit-driven growth and corresponding asset price increases we've seen reached their limits? Certainly, the volatility and sell-offs we're seeing in the markets lately seem to indicate that investors' confidence in policymakers is waning. If another recession hits, are central bankers out of ammunition? And with demographic trends, such as more baby boomers retiring and the pressure on social programs, will there be even less room for politicians to maneuver in response to a downturn? I think it's fair to say that we are in uncharted territory. The differences in all of our businesses between down 1, 2, or 3 and up 1, 2, or 3 are gigantic to us, and certainly in the aggregate. They affect how we allocate capital, invest, make decisions to build, not build, hire, not hire, buy more, don't buy more. In short, they affect everything. And as a backdrop to these uncertainties, you add the political and regulatory issues I referenced, and of course the competitive ones. Wow. No wonder we're all here trying to make sense and figure out what is going on, because it matters. In my industry, fashion retail, things have been volatile and unpredictable, and overall pretty tough since about Labor Day. Maybe not as bad as some recent reports have suggested, but not exactly peaches and cream. Retailing as an industry supports 42 million jobs in the U.S., pouring $2.6 trillion into the GDP. And it's being pulled every which way right now by rapid shifts in consumer spending patterns, technology advances, the roller coaster stock market, unstable national economies, particularly China right now, and world politics. The U.S. Commerce Department said total retail sales increased 2.2% year over year, but that December retail sales actually were down 0.2%. And fourth quarter GDP just came out, and I think they were up 0.7%. So slowdown for sure. Now I want to lay a real zinger on you. Check this out. In 1964, AT&T, then the most valuable U.S. company, was worth $267 billion in today's dollars, and they employed 758,000 people. Today, Google is worth $480 billion with a workforce of just 55,000. Apple is worth over $500 billion with a workforce of about 100,000, and Facebook at $300 billion with 12,000 employees. Let me let that sink in for a second, guys. This really begs the question, do the same rules of economics and business still apply? I have to ask. Has the world of supply and demand turned into a world of demand and then supply? Is it possible that the world's ability to supply exceeds demand? So many of the assumptions we've been operating under no longer seem to hold true entirely, and at the minimum require re-examination. In the midst of these unprecedented economic times, what I increasingly am coming to believe is that it's not what you know that sets you apart in today's world. It's what you want to know. Curiosity is a quality related to inquisitive thinking such as exploration, investigation, and learning, evident by observation. It's a motivated desire for information. Let me tell you a quick story about someone you've probably heard of. As Ian Leslie relates, one morning in 1983, an American businessman in Milan set out from his hotel on foot. He had traveled to Italy on behalf of his employer, a small chain in Seattle that sold coffee beans to discerning consumers. As he walked that morning, he kept passing coffee bars and wondering what they were like inside. Finally, his curiosity got the better of him, and he went in one. The smell of freshly made espresso, the flair of the barista, the musical language of latte and cappuccino, the customers exchanging gossip, all this fell upon him like an epiphany. By the time he returned to the U.S., Howard Schultz had a new vision for the company called Starbucks that would become one of the world's most recognizable brands. The rewards of curiosity are indeed unpredictable, but the future, I believe, belongs to the curious. 21st century economies are rewarding those with an unquenchable desire to explore, discover, and solve problems. My view, and I believe that shared by all of you guys, as evidenced by the fact that you're here today, is that you guys, come what may, want to be the inquisitive ones. As Albert Einstein said, the important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. Well, I think we've come to the right place, because our speakers today are some of the best and brightest and are guaranteed to satisfy and pique our interest and curiosity. I'm going to quickly introduce our first speaker. Again, he's going to talk about global macro level issues. His name is Michael Drury. Michael's the chief economist at McVane Trading and Investment over in Memphis. They specialize in commodities and other things. He joined the firm in 1992 after serving for 5 years as a senior economist with Alan Sinai at Lehman Brothers, Shearson Lehman Brothers, and its successor firms. He assesses global macroeconomic developments to help develop hedging strategies using futures markets and interest rates, currencies, and industrial materials. He's chairman of the Global Interdependence Center, serves on the executive board of the National Association for Business Economics, is the founder and first president of the Mid-South Association for Business Economics, works as a member of the National Business Economic Issues Council, and a non-resident member of the American Chamber of Commerce in Beijing, and is the author of McVane Trading's Weekly Economic Update. Michael received his Bachelor of Science in Economics from the Georgia Institute of Technology and did his grad work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Michael Drury to the 2016 Business Forecast Luncheon. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Kathy, the university, and my good friend Marianne Greenwood for inviting me here today. They told me I had 20 minutes to cover the global economy, so I'm going to talk really, really fast. Actually, what I'm going to do is not so much forecast as give you a framework in which to think about the global economy, because I learned a long time ago as an economist to stop forecasting because I wasn't really very good at it. In fact, there aren't very many economists who are very, very good at it. What I try to work on is figure out where is now. Because if I can figure out where is instead of where the street thinks is or Washington thinks is, I've got a much better chance of figuring out where the economy is going to go. There we go. So as I look at the world economy, the first thing to realize is that the world's roughly 4 quadrants right now. The United States is one, Europe is one, China and the commodities producers that China deals with are one, and then old Asia, Japan, Korea, Taiwan are about an eighth, and then the rest of the world makes up the rest. The second thing to realize is that last year was a global recession. We did not participate in the United States. The United States grew about 3% in nominal terms last year, 2% real, 1% inflation. But the rest of the world shrank in dollars. And that's because the rest of the world devalued almost every country on the planet in order to get its labor costs down so that they could compete more effectively on the global stage. So my first message to you is that we are not going to have a global recession in 2016, 17, or 18 because we had one in 2015. That recession was started about this time 2 years ago in China, when the Chinese decided to crack down on corruption. And the rationale is very simple, is that, in the United States, if you want to do business, you go to the bank, you tell them your business plan. If they like your business plan, they give you some money. Lehman Brothers caused a great crisis in the United States because you couldn't go to a bank anymore and get money because everybody was scared and nobody was lending. Well, in China, the way you do business is you call up a politician, you incentivize him, and after you've finished incentivizing him, he tells you where to invest your money. Well, when they had the corruption campaign and they cracked down, you could no longer go to and incentivize your politician. And even if you did, he wouldn't tell you anything because he was way more scared about losing all the money that he'd been incentivized with in the past instead of collecting new incentives in the future. And China realized that they had a big problem on their hand about the middle of 14, and they started lowering their interest rates. By December, they were reducing their reserve requirements. By early in 2015, they were increasing fiscal stimulus in the form of railway projects and things like that. But they never really backed off on the corruption campaign. So even though they were injecting stimulus all year long, they were still reducing the desire of businesses to do anything. And so China has been a problem for the global economy for the last year and a half. The good news is that you can't dig a hole to China. I mean, you've got a lot of areas that are already slowed down enough that even if they just stay where they are at zero, that's a tremendous improvement from a year ago. Now, I look at the world differently than everybody else that you know. So I'm going to explain how I look at the world, and because it's the way I look at the world, it is the correct way to look at the world. When I first started on Wall Street back in 1982 with Gary Shilling, Shilling's one of the great recession callers in the history of economics, a lot of my job was to go around the country and talk to different areas. So I'd go to, we were in New York, and I'd go to Boston to talk to technology firms. I'd go to, St. Louis to talk to Emerson Electric, to Minneapolis to talk to 3M. I'd go out west to talk to defense companies, down to Houston to talk to oil companies, in D.C. to learn about policy. I don't do that anymore. I don't do that anymore because if you dropped me out of an airplane into the shopping mall of any major city in the United States, I wouldn't know where I was until I found the hat store, and I could figure out what teams were playing there. Because the largest employer in every city in the United States is either Walmart or the university or the healthcare system. And so you don't have the flavor that you used to have of lots of differentiation amongst, it's a very homogeneous society. And the way that I came to look at it was that, New York and San Francisco, they were the suburbs. They were the financial leaders. They were where the doctors, the lawyers, the business leaders lived, and where recessions were not marked by unemployment, but by changes in financial wealth. The Rust Belt, the center of the country, well, That was where old business was operating that was more worried about paying the pensions that they'd already decided they had agreed to, and not about growth. And the Sun Belt was Atlanta and Phoenix, and that was where you looked for growth. Today, I travel around the world, and as I travel around the world, the United States, the entire United States, is the suburbs. It's where the doctors, the lawyers, the business leaders live, and where unemployment rates are not what you worry about, but financial services. The Rust Belt is Japan and Europe. They're losing ground, they're older, they're worried about their pensions, and the Sun Belt is China and Asia. And as I look at that world, the first thing to notice is that, we haven't had a manufacturing recession in the United States in 30 years. Because we're the suburbs. We've had the RTC crisis, a financial crisis, the NASDAQ bubble, a financial crisis, and Lehman Brothers, a financial crisis. I don't see a financial crisis on the near horizon, so I don't see a recession for the United States. But much more importantly, those were not U.S. recessions. The RTC crisis was started when the Nikkei bubble popped in Japan. The 2000 recession in the United States was basically a byproduct of the Asian crisis when the Japanese took their money after the Nikkei bubble and moved into the rest of Asia, blew up those economies. That sent a lot of money back to the United States in 1998 and 1999, right into the teeth of Y2K, when businesses needed to borrow every dime they could get their hands on because there was a very real possibility that they would not exist on January 1st. And the Lehman crisis, well, that was us, so sorry. But as you look at the United States' role in the world, it's basically to pass growth into the rest of the world. We used to run a small trade surplus in the United States, but when oil started up because of the decisions made by the Shah of Iran in the 1970s, we started running a trade deficit with OPEC, then with Japan, then during the Asian crisis with Asia, and now most recently with China. And now, even after Lehman has settled out, we still got a 3% trade deficit, and there's nobody on the planet who really thinks that it's going to get much smaller than that. So the role of the United States is to push growth into the rest of the world. So how are we doing, and are we able to do that? Well, wealth is doing very well in the United States. It's bounced nicely in the stock market since the bottom at 666 after Lehman. We're a little bit 10% lower today than we were at the peak about 6 months back, but that's not the end of the world. We've had volatility in stock markets before, and the housing market's coming back. Home prices are rising about 5%, and that's faster than inflation. Corporate profits in the United States are pretty good. And this is critical because I don't believe in a U.S. economy anymore. I believe that there is only a global economy. And I believe that because the world is run by multinational corporations who decide where they're going to produce, where they're going to pay taxes, where they're going to have their headquarters, and those decisions are independent of where they're going to sell their goods. And as those companies look at an international environment, they're looking at 4 policy levers in every country that they look at: monetary policy, fiscal policy, regulatory policy, and exchange rates. As those countries look at the United States today, they see that interest rates were low for a long, long time, but now they're starting to rise. More importantly, even if interest rates were to stay where they are right now in the United States, a 5-year interest rate will rise for the next 5 years because they were so low back in 11, which is the comparison now. And that's important because a lot of business loans are 5-year loans that are just rolled over. And from 1980 till now, you've always rolled down. But that's no longer the case. Interest rates are a headwind in the United States. Fiscal policy. There's not much chance until we get a new president, whoever it is, that we're going to have any change in fiscal policy in the United States. And there's maybe not much chance that it's going to change after that either. So there's not a lot of businesses that are betting that they're going to get stimulus from the federal government. Regulation, don't even get me started. I mean, we work in the financial services community, and it's pretty hard, but it's pretty hard for everybody in the United States today as we pay for the sins of Lehman with Dodd-Frank and other regulatory controls. And then finally, exchange rates. Exchange rates are rising. The dollar's strengthening. Now, this is good for the United States in that every time the dollar's strengthened in the past, it's been good for the United States' ability to acquire the best and the brightest from around the world. And the dollar is rising right now. But the bottom line is, if you're one of those multinational companies looking at where you're going to do business in the world today, it's not the United States that's your first choice, because all of the headwinds are here because we are leading the global economy right now. So if you look at this chart, you'll see that the red line there, China, is on the bottom. They're doing the worst. Everybody knows that. The important thing to realize about that line is that it's right on the 50 mark on the left-hand scale there. It's right on the 50 mark. Well, 50 in China means that not that growth is above or below zero, but that growth is above or below expectation. And the expectation these days in China is about 6.5% that the government will admit to. Nobody believes that number, but that's the number that they use. And so no one expects China to grow faster than 6.5%. Well, most of the rest of the world would love to grow at 6.5%. So we'll get back to China in a minute. Secondly is that both Japan and Europe, after having a big rise in 13, have kind of leveled off, and they're at pretty nice levels. The only country that's doing badly on that chart is the green line, and that's the United States. And the key there is that that's the only country that produces oil. Oil is what's driving the recovery in the global economy. Japan, Europe basically don't produce any except for Norway. India, Korea are all benefiting from much lower oil prices. Also, you've got massive monetary stimulus still going on in Japan and again in Europe. They had stopped there, the blue line, which hurt them a couple years ago, but they're back to producing. Meanwhile, the United States has stopped. The key here is that every place in the world is going to do better than the United States in 2016. I don't think we're going to do badly. I just think if I was going to put my money to work, I'd be putting it to work someplace else. One of the most important exchange rates in the world is the yen-euro cross. Now, everybody looks at everything compared to dollars, but the Germans and the Japanese realize that they compete with each other, and so they worry about this cross rate. You may have noticed that last night the Japanese dropped into negative interest rates, and they did that for the sole purpose of driving their currency down so that they would import inflation. Well, driving their currency down will also import growth, won't it? You think they missed that? I don't think they missed that. I think they knew exactly what they were doing when they dropped their interest rates, and they're just trying to steal market share back from a Europe which is doing pretty well. If we look at GDP growth rates, the United States is bouncing along, these are in nominal terms, bouncing along about 3%. I look at nominal instead of real because this is cash register receipts. This is what businesses worry about. It's bouncing along about 3%, and it's come back up to about 3% in both Europe and Japan. So everybody's doing kind of okay. It's better to be at 3% in Europe because their population grows about 1% less than the United States. It's even better to be at 3% in Japan because their population growth is about 1.5% less than the United States. So on a per capita basis, everybody, again, is doing better than the US. This is the number that's driving everybody crazy. Everybody's looking at the Chinese stock market and get all upset about there's going to be a debacle in China. Well, the first thing to know about that chart is there was an even bigger spike back before Lehman, and nobody even talked about a slowdown in China back around Lehman. And the reason that that doesn't make any difference is because nobody in China knows what the stock market is. There's about 30 million people playing the stock market. They're all wealthy beyond the wildest dreams of Croesus, and they don't care if they make or lose money. In fact, most of the people who are participating in the Chinese stock market are speculators that are just in there because they can't get to Macau. This is the most important number on the planet. It's the rate of growth in the Chinese yuan in dollars. And it was going straight up from 2005 through 2013, and it's been kind of waffling and sliding slowly lower ever since then. Why is that the most important number on the planet? Because if you took Chinese growth in nominal dollars from 2005 when they started to really accelerate their currency, back then you had 10% GDP growth, 10% inflation, and 5% appreciation against the dollar. Appreciation against the dollar, even though their inflation rate was 10 times ours. which gave them buying power of anywhere from 25 to 35% more each year in dollars. Dollars that buy copper, that buy oil, that buy corn. And that set off the commodity supercycle. That's what caused corn, copper, everything to explode. And those prices went straight up until Lehman Brothers, and then they crashed, and the Chinese stepped in with a massive stimulus program, which pushed those prices right back up until they peaked, and every commodity price in the world peaked on March 11th, 2011. I know the date because that's the day of the Japanese tsunami. And that broke supply chains all across Asia so deeply that supply, which had been driven by these rapidly rising commodity prices, finally was able to catch up with demand. And since then, every price of every commodity in the world, I mean every one, iron ore, copper, sand, everything, has been falling, except for oil. And the reason is the same tsunami that caused the commodity supercycle to end knocked out all of the nuclear reactors in Japan and created demand for 2 million barrels of oil. And it took 4 more years of fracking to catch up to that supply until finally, late in 2014, the Chinese, who were having their economic problems, picked up the phone and called Saudi Arabia and said, we're not taking any oil this month. Not we're taking less oil this month. We're not taking any oil this month. And the Saudis caved in and allowed prices to collapse. And we've been fighting this, end of a cycle phenomenon now for a while. Now, a lot of people are going to try to tell you that lower oil is bad because they're in the oil industry or they're affected by it. It's not. The simple rationale is that oil at $100 was high and oil at $30 is low. Well, one of those two prices was wrong. Which one was wrong? Well, when it was at 100, we had OPEC, which was a cartel which was causing price disruption. And at 30, we don't have OPEC. We have free markets dictating prices. Free markets dictating prices is always better than when you've got market interference. So in the short run, you're going to have pain while people adjust to the fact that oil is 30, especially the people that borrowed money when it was at 100. But for everybody else in the world, this is a tremendous stimulus on the order of $2 trillion in a $75 trillion economy. That's 1.5%. That's pretty good. So if I'm worried about China, the real question is, where is China? And is China going to keep dragging on global growth, or is it going to stop being a problem? Well, my first mentor, Gary Schilling, used to tell me that a recession is a correction of excesses. And so once you've identified the excess, if you start fixing it, then you get out of recession. And the Chinese have been banging away hammer and tongs with all kinds of policies, with monetary policy, lower interest rate, fiscal policy, more railroads, regulatory policy reform, opening up of financial markets, and exchange rate policy, that Yuan, lowering it. They've got all 4 cannon firing while the United States is going in the other direction. So we think that China is going to get out of their recession. It's just going to take time. How bad is it? Well, the Chinese say that their growth is 7%. Ha ha, you say. I don't believe that number. Well, I don't either. But they're good at lying, but they're not that good. So we look at things like the inflation rate correlated to the GDP rate, and we see that they both tell us that the economy is still slowing down. And they tell us that that number at 7% may not be so wildly wrong as you think. The reality is that primary and secondary, the industrial side of China, which is about 50% of China, is growing right at 0. And in nominal terms, they have about 6% output growth that they claim. They have 6% deflation. So cash register receipts to an industrial business in China is 0. That's why their profits are so bad. Well, then they'll lay off people, right? No, not allowed. The party does not allow you to lay off people. You just have to suck it up in lower profits. Meanwhile, the service side of the economy is booming. I mean, you've all seen stories about Alibaba sales being up 32%, international travel being up 40%, cell phone sales being up dramatically. I mean, there's a lot of good in China. It's just not a lot of good that multinational corporations can cash in on in a lot of cases, because it's restaurant sales, it's small businesses, it's things like that. China is aware that they've got a debt problem. You have two big spikes in debt here. One is in '09 when they set off the let's get out of Lehman problem. And the second was in 2012, which was the last year of Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao's lifespan as 10-year rulers of China. And they wanted to go out on a high note, so they did. And then as soon as they left, they had another credit crunch put on. Now, a credit crunch in China just means that there is tighter credit available. It doesn't mean that it's declining as a percentage of GDP, but it does mean that it's tougher to get credit. The two things that were big problems for China when they had their slowdown were real estate, which used to be about 15% of their economy, and trade, which used to be about another 15% of their economy. At the bottom, real estate was falling at about a 30% annual rate. And at the bottom, trade was falling at about a 15% annual rate. Well, when 30% of your economy is falling faster than 10%, you got a problem, because there's no way that everything else is growing very fast at all. I believe that in the middle of 2014, China was growing about 3% versus the announced number of 10%. Now I think it's growing about 5%. 5% is better than 3%, so that's a recovery. It's also faster than growth anywhere else on the planet, so you should remain interested, although the rules are different as to where you should put your money to work. Now, if we look at commercial real estate or residential real estate in China, you can see that, the volume sales are up 7.4%. The total sales, dollar sales, are up 15%. So in other words, prices are rising about 7%, which is pretty toasty. And it's much, much faster on the East Coast, where it's over 10%. And the East Coast is about 60% of the real estate in the country. So real estate's no longer the problem. Real estate prices. That doesn't mean that construction's coming back yet. It just means that the first stage for real estate not to be collapsing anymore is there. And the second is trade. Well, the Chinese have got zero growth in exports, negative growth in exports, but they've got very, very negative growth in imports because of price declines. And as a result, their trade surplus has gone from about 3% of GDP to 6% of GDP in the last year. Countries do not go into recession when they have 6% of GDP to spend, when they've got that kind of inflows of capital. So my general view of the world is that we were in recession starting in 2014, hit the bottom in 2015, that we're starting to recover because everybody is stimulating with monetary, fiscal, regulatory, and foreign exchange policies, except the United States, but that is Kevin Kleeson's problem. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Michael. That was
Left my phone up
splendid.
there. I left my phone up there.
I have graph envy. That was really great. Very illuminating. Thank you. Our second panelist, as Michael set up, is Kevin Kleeson. He's going to talk to us about the domestic economy. Kevin's a business economist and bank officer in the research division at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, who in the cycle of things right now has a lot more power. I'll let him tell you about that in this upcoming year. In his position, he analyzes current U.S. macroeconomic and financial market developments. He also reports on and analyzes economic conditions in the 7 states of the 8th Federal Reserve District, managing the bank's burgundy books and developing various materials and information sources for the bank's outreach efforts. Kevin was instrumental in the development of the St. Louis Fed's Financial Stress Index and the St. Louis Fed's Price Pressures Measures. From 2006 to 2013, he taught economics part-time at Washington University. He's a member of the American Economic Association, the National Association for Business Economists, and the Association of Christian Economists. In September 2011, he was recognized as an NABE Fellow, one of the organization's highest honors. Kevin holds an MA in economics from Colorado State University. Please welcome Kevin Kleeson. Thanks, Bill.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. It's great to be here, and I just also want to thank Kathy and Dean Waller and the University of Arkansas, and like Michael, I've known Marianne for for years, many moons, and just greatly appreciate the invitation to address you all this, I guess this afternoon. And I just want to thank Michael for leaving me that challenge. We in the Federal Reserve specialize in solving problems. So, as Bill mentioned, I'm from Colorado, my wife and I, and you may know that our football team is playing in a game a week from Sunday. Colorado has the same affinity with the Broncos as St. Louis does with the Cardinals, and I'm a great Cardinals fan, but I'm a Broncos fan. So as I talk to you about our forecast, I just want to say this is the Denver Bronco Super Bowl winning forecast that you are about to hear. All right. But first I have to give my disclaimer that the views I express are not necessarily those of the St. Louis Fed or the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. All right. So I'd like to start my talk off with kind of a big picture overview of the land. You know, we live in this media-saturated world and just constantly bombarded with, terabytes of data literally every second, it seems like. So I think it's always good to kind of step back and look at things from the 30,000-foot view. And, the economy is into the 7th year of its expansion. And yes, it is an expansion, as best we can tell. Early in 2016, the economy is still moving forward. As Bill mentioned, today we received the Q4 2015 real GDP report. It showed growth of about 0.75% at an annual rate. So the same drivers that have really driven the economy last year, the consumer and housing construction, were once again the strongest parts of the report. So as long as those two sectors continue to do well, I think we'll probably also do pretty well this year as well. But the song remains the same, as a famous band once said. We've had extremely modest growth this expansion, low inflation. Inflation's been extremely low. So, when I was in graduate school in the 80s, if you told me the Fed had quadrupled the size of its balance sheet, I, like most of my peers, would have said inflation would have gone through the roof. Instead, inflation has actually moved down over the past several years, and now it's quite low. Even in the midst of extremely easy monetary policy. The Fed, as you know, lifted off in December, its last meeting, and market expectations are that the Fed will remain on hold this year. The Fed economic projections that were released with that meeting said that at that time, at least, Federal Reserve policymakers, given where they know or where they stood at the time, that they expected to see about 4 rate increases this year. So ultimately, we'll see where the economy takes us. But either way, it's going to be a rather slow trajectory up to something more normal. The labor market remains extremely strong. In fact, one of the dichotomies we have in the economy is that the labor market is extremely strong in what we call the goods market or product market. The expenditure side of the GDP accounts, a lot of that data is a little bit weak. The unemployment rate is very low. We think it's probably pretty close to what we call the natural rate. It's certainly well below the average unemployment rates that's prevailed over the past 50 years. So that's kind of where we are right now. As I see it, there we go. There's three key themes in the outlook. I think the first key theme is that forecasters really, for most of this expansion, have overpredicted real GDP growth and inflation. And it's not just Federal Reserve. I'm a forecaster, so I'm guilty of this sin as much as anybody else in the forecasting business. But it's private sector forecasts as well. Traditionally what happens when we have a very deep recession, that the economy really wants to snap back and really grow quite strongly. And you can think about it as sort of stretching a rubber band. You know, the deeper or the farther you pull it down, the bigger the snapback. So coming out of the financial crisis and deep recession, we really expected very strong GDP growth for at least 2 years, maybe 3 years, and that really just didn't happen. So this had caused us to be quite humble about our forecasting prowess. But as a forecaster, one of the things you learn quite early, if you can't forecast well, forecast often. So that's what we do. And let's see if I can get this clicker to work. I don't know. There we go. This is probably the most important chart I have in my presentation. And this chart kind of explains why we're in this rut we're in terms of very weak growth. All right, so what I'm plotting here, the blue bars are real GDP growth, and the red bars is the growth of labor input, and the black bars is the growth of labor productivity. So at a high level, you can think of GDP growth as sort of how many people we have to make things, and how productive they are, how efficient they are. So you multiply, or you add those two together in terms of their growth rates, and you come up with a measure of real GDP growth. And I'm looking at the performance of the economy as measured by real GDP in the current expansion, which is the one 2009 to 2015, and the previous 4 expansions. So you'll see that there's this very disturbing trend that's gone on really now for 30 years or so. We had very strong growth in the 80s and 90s. Growth slowed down to about 2.75% in the 2001, 2007 expansion, and now in this expansion, growth has averaged about 2.25% a year, and clearly that is probably the weakest expansion in terms of real GDP growth, certainly in the post-World War II period, maybe even going back further. So you can see that one of the key reasons why is that labor productivity growth has slowed tremendously. Labor input is also slow, but it's about 1% a year, and that's basically measuring hours worked. Now, that's probably going to slow a little bit more for the foreseeable future as the population ages. We'll probably see the labor force participation rate continue to decline. So labor input growth is probably going to slow a little bit more. So the way that we're going to have to generate faster growth is probably through increases in labor productivity. And that is basically a function of fiscal policy, regulatory policy. The educational establishment plays a tremendous role in that, and technology diffusion and all those things sort of wrapped up into one. It's a very complicated process, but clearly it's something that we need to reverse, and we need to reverse quite quickly if we want to grow faster. All right, the second theme in the outlook is, and Mike touched on this a little bit, falling oil prices and a strengthening U.S. dollar. So in terms of oil prices, inflation, here's the blue line is the Fed's preferred inflation measure. That's the price index for personal consumption expenditures. It's what we call the headline PCE. It's measured on a year-over-year basis. We have data through November. So the growth rate from November 2014 to November 2015 was a little less than 0.5%. The Fed has a target of 2%. Now, our view is that if you strip out the oil price shock, which has reduced headline inflation tremendously, a measure, probably we think a good measure of underlying inflation that sort of does that is a measure that's produced by the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. It's called their trim mean measure. So our story is that oil prices can only fall so far, but at some point they are going to rebound, and when they do, that blue line is going to converge back up to the green line, and we'll see inflation return pretty close to the trend. Maybe this year, maybe next year, but at some point that's going to happen. Now, obviously, one of the risks to our forecasts is that predicting oil prices is a wild card. So if oil prices suddenly rebound and rise by much more than expected, then obviously the Fed could find itself facing a much higher inflation rate than anticipated. Now, whoops. One of the things we do is we take our forecasting model for inflation, and what we can do is we can sort of break that forecast into buckets, and we can say, okay, our forecast for inflation in 2016 is X percent, and we can say, okay, what's the probability that it's going to be in these 4 buckets? Is there a probability that inflation in 2016 could be negative, so we have deflation, and that is certainly a probability. It's non-zero, and you can see it's ticked up. So we're running this sort of probability exercise at every point in time where you see a dot on the chart. So if you look at the last data point on your chart, you can see because of the sharp decline in oil prices, there is a non-negligible probability for deflation, but clearly in terms of the highest probability where we see inflation shaking out this year is somewhere in the 0 to 1.5% bucket. And so at least through December of last year, we saw about a 70% probability that that's where inflation will end up. Now, as I mentioned earlier, predicting oil prices is a wild card. Michael mentioned that declines in oil prices certainly produce significant benefits to the economy. So one of the things I've been sort of struggling with as an economist is the nature of oil shocks changing? The conventional narrative is that declining oil prices is a net positive for the U.S. economy, and we still hold to that view, but is that more or less positive than what we thought, say, 10 years ago? Now, historically, oil price increases have mattered much more than decreases, right? So, in fact, if you look at most of the post-World War recessions, almost all of them were preceded by a very sharp increase in oil prices. Now, this asymmetry, as we think about it, may be changing, and there's a couple reasons why. First of all, we're just more efficient at producing things, using less energy. Our energy consumption per dollar of GDP has declined about 40%. Since 1985. Also, we're now a major crude oil producer thanks to the shale formations in the Dakotas and Texas and elsewhere. This has reduced crude oil exports by about 60% since 2011. I think a very underappreciated aspect of the decline in oil prices is that it's naturally been accompanied by extremely high levels of volatility in crude oil markets, and one of the things that I found in a previous research paper that I published is that high levels of uncertainty generally are not good for businesses, and particularly in terms of planning for capital expenditures. So the high levels of volatility we see in crude oil markets, I think, can impose a drag on the economy through that transmission mechanism, but also just simply if you're in the energy producing sector, things are not good right now. We have a steel plant outside of St. Louis, U.S. steel plant that produces piping for the energy producing sector, exploration sector, and they've subsequently shut down, and there's no tentative date for their resumption of activity. So clearly there are some significant downside effects to the decline in oil prices. But if you look at So let me just talk on the dollar a little bit. First of all, so obviously sort of the first order effects of the decline in the dollar, the increase in the dollars, it helps to reduce exports, and that sort of slows real GDP growth. And there also it reduces import prices, and that feeds into lower inflation as well. The dollar appreciation often coincides with a oil price decline. But the net positive part of the oil price equation is that it increases the real purchasing power of households and therefore real consumption spending. So empirically, you can sort of think of the trade effects and the consumption effects largely canceling out, and you kind of see that in this chart. The top line is the contribution to real GDP growth at any point in time from consumption spending, and the black line is the contribution to real GDP growth from basically the trade balance. So the last observation we have in 2015, the average of the first 3 quarters is, again, a small net positive, where the trade is a drag and the effect on consumption spending is positive. All right, so the third key theme in the outlook is there's this growing divergence between the manufacturing and the services sector. Clearly, the stronger dollar, weaker exports, the slowdown in China, lower oil prices have clearly taken a toll on the manufacturing sector. I think if you look at the index of leading economic indicators, 4 of those series are manufacturing related. So when we see the manufacturing sector beginning to weaken, our antlers kind of stick up and we start to pay pretty careful attention to what's going on. But if you look at sort of the much broader economy, the services sector, which is basically 75% of the economy or so, there still appears to be pretty decent growth, and one of the ways you see that is in terms of the employment sector. In December, job gains in the service providing sector were quite strong, well over 200,000. So it does not appear as yet, at least, that the slowdown in manufacturing is sort of spilling over to the broader sector, but clearly we're watching that pretty carefully. So what's my near-term outlook? I think something trend-like growth is probably most likely, and but clearly you can think about risks. There's certainly risks that are evident on both sides. Obviously, I mentioned some of the risks in the manufacturing sector, and if consumer would falter and housing would falter, then that obviously would be a risk on the downside. Job gains, we think, should continue to outpace the underlying growth of the labor force. As best we can measure it, anything above 75,000 or so is sufficient enough job growth just to keep the unemployment rate constant. So most forecasters are expecting job growth this year to be somewhere around 175 to 200,000. So I see the unemployment rate continuing to decline this year. But as with anything with forecasting and monetary policy making, that shocks, bad things can occur or good things can occur. That causes you to adjust your forecasts, causes you to adjust your policy. So in that case, monetary policy, the Federal Reserve needs to be nimble, and that is most reflected in our policy of being sort of data dependent and seeing where the data and our forecasts will take us. So anyway, I appreciate the time and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. That was awesome. So my takeaways, I think we're playing Where's Waldo with the inflation right now. Like, why aren't we seeing inflation? We like low oil prices, but not this low. And the challenge is we just all need to be more productive, it sounds like. So, our third and last speaker is, everybody knows, Kathy Deck. She's going to talk to us about the Arkansas economy, of particular interest to all of us. And Kathy's presentation will focus on just really a local outlook. So she's the director of the Center for Business and Economic Research at the Sam M. Walton College of Business. She's managed numerous studies for a variety of companies, nonprofits, governments in the state and the region. Before joining the center, she was the antitrust economist for the Arizona Attorney General. And this year, Kathy was named Business Advocate of the Year by the Fayetteville Chamber of Commerce. Congratulations. She earned her bachelor's degree in economics from the College of William and Mary and a master's degree in economics from the the University of Wisconsin in Madison. There's kind of a connection going on here. Welcome, Kathy Deck, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I have the advantage over our other speakers in that I have addressed this room before. As a matter of fact, this is actually my 9th year of addressing you. And so if I put up a chart and you recognize it, clap or something. Clap when your favorite arises. But I actually named my presentation this year, The Arkansas Economy in 2016, Cruising Altitude. Cruising Altitude. Because when you think about what's happened in the last year in Arkansas, things were pretty good. I actually usually ask the room, I say, how are things? And people go, eh. But across the state of Arkansas in 2015, things were pretty good. And as we look forward into 2016, as we look forward at our forecast and then think about our risks, about our upside risks and our downside risks, gosh, oh golly gee, it seems like we have a lot of the things in place that we need here in this state and here in this region to continue doing as well as we have been doing. I will step back and think about cruising altitude for just 1 second, though. Perhaps you've been on a plane, you reach cruising altitude, you think things are fine, and then what? Turbulence, right? You hit a little bit of turbulence. It doesn't knock you off your track. You still get where you're going. But sometimes external factors come in. We see things happening globally, or we see things happening nationally that have an impact on the state and on the region. And so I do want to make it clear that when we talk about, more of the same, investments being in place to have good things happen, it doesn't mean that we won't have to go through some bumps up and some bumps down. And so I think it's an apt way to think about what's going to happen in 2016. I'm going to start today's presentation talking about a measure that is near and dear to many of us in Arkansas, one we've thought about for a very, very long time, and it's per capita personal income. The graph that you see, you've seen before if you've been to this luncheon, and it shows the average personal income that we see per person for the United States, the blue line, for Arkansas, the red line, and then for Northwest Arkansas. And as you all know, I'm a great user of federal statistics like this, and statistics get revised as new information becomes apparent. And so this graph looked a little bit different. If you have your handout from last year, you could go back and go back all of those times and see what it looks like. But there's something that sticks out on this graph to me, and that is, well, of course, all of the per capita personal income levels are growing. But something big happened in Northwest Arkansas back in the recovery from the recession. And what happened in Northwest Arkansas is we went from kind of tracking where we were going along the national economy, and then seeing per capita personal incomes that were actually growing faster and then are at a higher level than that nationally. And I think you can't really overstate how important this piece of information is to a place like Northwest Arkansas. When we think about the rest of the country, or we think about how we present ourselves to the rest of the country, we have always been a state where we were just a little below average. Certainly Arkansas remains a little bit below average in terms of per capita personal income. But that's not true here. Here in Northwest Arkansas, we're different now. And we are a place that has a standard of living that, and I'll talk a lot about that as we go forward, that is enviable, right? Quite enviable, and not just enviable because we say it is, but enviable in the data as well. And so I wanted to make sure that everybody had seen the good news, because it's a very interesting piece of information, and particularly when we see that the income growth is matching what we see nationally, it means we're going to continue to stay ahead. So I point that out so we can go forward. So it's an interesting thing to have a business forecast luncheon and then have your speakers go, no, never forecast. Don't do it. I also agree, never forecast. Don't do it, because none of us have a crystal ball, and this is true. We do have math. Math is on our side, And so we're able to create models, and we're able to look at what has happened in the past, and then we're able to talk about what we think is likely to happen into the future if the patterns that we've seen in the past hold, and then talk about risks upside and downside of that. And what you'll see here is what has happened in Arkansas in terms of our employment. We really had a very interesting period in Arkansas after the recession where we just didn't recover. So when you heard Kevin talk about, post-recession, you often expect a great big growth rate that brings you back to where you were to begin with. And we really didn't see that in Arkansas. We just went sideways for quite some time. But in 2014 and 2015, that stopped being the case. The state started improving its employment situation dramatically. And as a matter of fact, if you look back over the last year, you'll see that the state added around 22,500 jobs. 22,500 jobs. I'm going to show you in a minute, where those were and where those were not. But the beautiful thing about math is when you're coming off of a record of some growth, it juices the model and puts some more growth in there. And so when my forecast, my baseline forecast from which I talk about, what's good and what good things might happen, what bad things might happen, is that Arkansas is going to grow by about another 11,000 jobs in 2016. And that is truly cruising altitude and good news in the extreme. Where? Well, we look at sectors and then we look at geographies where that might be. The Arkansas economy is still manufacturing heavy. So even though the United States economy is not nearly as manufacturing dependent as it once was, we know that the Arkansas economy is still manufacturing heavy. We're beginning to get a little bit more on that education and health services. What would really help this state enormously is if that professional and business services sector was a little bit bigger. And then, of course, we're overweighted in trade, transportation, and utilities in this state. We have more than the national average among retailers, wholesalers, and transportation as well. And so this is what we look like. Just in case you're keeping score, it was what we looked like last year, too. And when we see where the growth has been, well, we know where we know what sectors have been under duress. Manufacturing employment in Arkansas has been under duress over the last year. We continue to underperform national employment growth in manufacturing, even though we are more intensive into manufacturing. And so that's unfortunate. It has to do with the mix of products that we create, how much we export, how little we export, those pieces of it, and what kinds of things we export. And then the mining and logging sector sticks out here. Mining and logging includes the energy sector, including the Fayetteville Shale that we hear so much about. So I'm sure everybody heard last week the job losses that came as a result of Southwestern Energy's basically slowing operations to almost nothing in the Fayetteville Shale so far. These numbers are only represented through December, so we know there's more to come. More pain, more job loss in that energy sector. But that's not different in Arkansas than it is everywhere else. We know that the energy sector has been a really tough place to be in 2015 and 2016, and it is. So what's the good news? Well, construction. Construction employment is on fire in Arkansas, and of course in Northwest Arkansas. We'll talk about that. We see that professional and business services that I said needed to grow for our state to really catch up with some of those good jobs that were doing very well. Education and health services, and our services generally have been doing well. 1.6% non-farm employment growth is fantastic for our state. It really is much better than what we have been experiencing. And so I think that as we look at the recent past and we look into the future, we have some nice looking momentum in the state's economy overall. If you look at unemployment rates for the state, it also has Northwest Arkansas as well. The state and the nation are moving very, very closely together. You basically can't tell the difference in terms of unemployment rates between the state and the nation. And Northwest Arkansas, of course, continues to have a much lower unemployment rate than that we see in either the U.S. or Arkansas. As you heard my colleagues talking about, you never just want to look at unemployment, the unemployment rate on its own. You want to understand, well, is it because people are entering the labor force? Is it because people are exiting the labor force? Are there employment opportunities? Are there not employment opportunities? And so we pay very close attention to what's happening in labor force. And there the news has been very good in recent times for Arkansas. What was so interesting in the immediate expansion period that the United States had after the recession is that in Arkansas, our labor force actually shrank much, much more quickly than it did during the recession itself, and for a longer and more extensive time period. We're getting some give back in 15 and 16, that kind of bounce back that we talk about that you would expect to see after such a prolonged period. And that is good news, and the labor force growth has really, stabilized and looks really good, even at the same time we see continued employment opportunities coming. In Northwest Arkansas, of course, the labor force growth did have a little bit of that decline, as we talked about back in 12, but over the last 18 months has been very, very strong and continues to outpace both the state and the nation. All right, this is my favorite thing to do, where you look across the state, you look at the various metropolitan areas of the state, you put them on the same scale. So those lines, if you're looking at, there are 5,000 difference in jobs. And then you say, okay, well, what have we seen really happen across the state? Where is the growth happening? Where is it not happening? So if you look in the top left corner, Fort Smith continues to struggle in terms of employment growth. Really, there has been nothing like a recovery from the recession. The recession happened at the same time we had the Whirlpool closed in Fort Smith, and that really, we've seen the employment level really not moderate that much since that time. So when you go looking around the state and you say, well, where do we see those jobs being created? Unfortunately, it has not been Fort Smith. We do see a number, of course, of investments that are taking hold, that are designed to improve employment growth, particularly around the downtown area, Fort Chaffee. We see investments in UA Fort Smith. We see investments in entrepreneurship, all in Fort Smith, designed to change that number around, but we have not seen that come to fruition in the most recent data. On the other hand, Little Rock, Central Arkansas, if you look in that top right-hand quadrant, they had some good stuff happen this year. So Central Arkansas, the data really took off this year. We didn't see even the normal kind of seasonal downturn in employment in Central Arkansas. They finally reached their pre-recession peak employment again last year. And so that's important because Central Arkansas remains the most populous part of the state. We need good things to happen there for the state's overall strength to happen. So when we look for where were the jobs gained, well, you can see there was a really good year for Arkansas happened in Central Arkansas in 2015. Jonesboro, it starts at a smaller base, that lower left-hand corner, starts at a smaller base, but has the highest growth rates in the state. So we see things happening in Jonesboro again, around their manufacturing sector and around their downtown and around the university there, that are all designed to create growth and growth in employment. And then Pine Bluff, we've talked about for many, many years, continues to pretty much offset even that spectacular growth we see in Jonesboro in employment. But as many of you will know, of course, this year they have announced a new initiative designed specifically to increase employment, increase population in the Pine Bluff area. And so I expect to see a number of investments happening that will bring that to bear. So if I sound like a broken record and I say investments, have I mentioned investments? It's because I truly do believe that the secret to the success of any region is in the investments that it makes. When we were knee-deep in the recession and things looked dire and it wasn't clear how we got out of the financial mess, people said, Kathy, what is your advice? What should we do? And I said, do not stop investing. In fact, now is a great time to invest. Prices are low, interest rates are low, invest now because the future is long. Maybe you don't know that, but it really, when we talk about investments in local economies, you can't talk about it enough. And nowhere is it more fun to talk about investments than here in Northwest Arkansas. So this graph is exactly the same as the four that I showed you on the previous page. It has the same scale, the same number of jobs, and you can see I've got to put a new line in next year When we go forward, I've got to add some additional space there. Employment growth in Northwest Arkansas continues to be nothing short of amazing. We saw 4,800 jobs gained over the year last year. And not to brag, but if you were here last year, anybody know what I said? Anybody? No, nobody was listening. It was 5,000 jobs was the forecast that we made for last year. So 4,800 is well within that. You will know here in Northwest Arkansas that cruising altitude I was talking about at the very beginning had some turbulence in it. We lost jobs at Walmart. We lost jobs. We continue to see some consolidation among our supplier community. We have a variety of businesses that have announced job losses, and then we have a variety of businesses that announce job gains. J.B. Hunt announcing that it's going to create more than 1,000 jobs over 6 years. We see the ebb and flow, so steady sailing isn't so steady. It's just what we expect. When we had the job announcements, when we see job losses, actually, I say you have to understand that the Northwest Arkansas economy is very dynamic, and it's huge. It's huge. Over $20 billion, right, is the size of the economy in Northwest Arkansas. And so we can handle the regular kinds of job announcements that we're going to get over time as companies try to position themselves for success over time. So we grew by 4,800 jobs last year. The math with the last year and some other in there says something around 5,700 in the coming year. That's a good number. I'm going to call it 5,000 again, just for the to be on the conservative. It can be on the conservative side there. But the forecast itself does actually call for continued growth in Northwest Arkansas. And where does that come from? Well, those investments. If you think about 9 years ago when I stood up here, and the amenities and the things that Northwest Arkansas did not have 9 years ago that it has now, then you can understand how this pie does change. We continue to see the trade, transportation, and utilities sector swell. We're up to 23% of employment in the region. Almost 1 in every 4 jobs are in that sector. Professional and business services, when I started talking about this, represented only about 13% of employment here. Now, in this region, we're up to 20%. 1 in every 5 jobs are in that professional and business services sector. We look to leisure and hospitality, to the arts. We see so many investments, whether we're talking about Crystal Bridges or the Amazeum. And then in leisure and hospitality also gets some of the good stuff, like all of the culinary arts programs that are going on throughout the region, the restaurants we see in Bentonville, the teaching we see in Bentonville, all of the investments in downtown, our microbreweries and our cideries, and the things that we have that we couldn't have imagined 9 years ago in this particular region show up in there. The mining, logging, and construction sector, it does include both the energy and construction, still remains around 4%. But that doesn't mean that we don't have big-time construction projects going on. So if you're down in Fayetteville, you see, of course, that the Walton Arts Center is completely going through a redesign. That is economic activity. You may have heard that the University of Arkansas wants to invest $160 million in construction for the stadium over the next few years. That is economic activity, and it doesn't just generate those construction jobs. It generates indirect and induced effects as well. And so we know not just about the things that are happening right now, but the things that are planned, the investments that are going to continue to be made to continue to make this area even better, pay off in terms of those job growth numbers. We see it in the distribution of where job growth has happened over the last year. We saw 1.9% employment growth in Northwest Arkansas. We saw manufacturing be the only sector that actually fell in employment on a year-over-year basis. And look at that leisure and hospitality number. You know there are good places to go eat now. You can tell, right there it is. The only thing that gives me just the teeniest, tiniest bit of pause, and would I be me if I didn't have the teeniest, tiniest bit of pause, is that professional and business services and trade, transportation, and utilities sector growth rates. They both are underperforming the overall economy, and of course, as I showed you before, we're talking about almost 45% of the employment distribution in the area. And so they're growing slowly. When those two sectors lead the way, everything else keeps coming on. I think a lot of the job growth that we're seeing right now is a result of the growth that is a result of things that were baked in the cake back in 14 and 15. And so we really want to see those two sectors begin to perform a little bit better. The consumer do his or her thing with those extra dollars from that cheap gas that we've been hearing so much about. So I want to leave you with a quick summary. Per capita personal income growth means this is even a better place to live than we thought it was, and we knew it was good to begin with. Construction is strong. We know about construction projects that are coming on the horizon. It's not actually leading employment growth, so keep that in mind. So when people ask me often, are we headed back to kind of an unsustainable pace of construction that we saw before? We are seeing absorption happening very nicely, even with the amount of construction that we're seeing right now. It's not ahead of everything else. When times were booming, construction was at the top of that chart, so it's a more sustainable situation than before the recession. We're still going to look forward to those out-of-area dollars that are going to come enjoy our great quality of life that we have here in Northwest Arkansas. And I worry about that professional and business services sector, and I worry about our trade, transportation, utilities sector in terms of their ability to generate the kind of growth that we like. I'll be watching that, and I hope you will too. At this point, I want you to look on your table, see some note cards. If you want to pass up some questions, we'll have some folks who will come pick those note cards up and bring them to the stage. But I'm going to ask our moderator, Bill Dillard, if he will, in fact, begin our kind of panel discussion. Thank you very much. You can sit if you
Pass
want
from
to.
here
You
down.
can do whatever you like.
I'll just kick it. So yeah, hand up those questions, please. And at this point, our moderators are going to call the hogs. No, I'm just playing it. Thank you, Kathy. You're a rock star. That was really spectacular. So we're going to, again, please feel free to put your questions in, then I'm going to get to ask some questions. But we're going to have a little bit of a dialogue here, and please give us any kind of specific stuff you'd like to ask these guys. So I think I'm going to move over here next to you guys. Just kidding. All right, I'm going to kick us off here. My first question is for Michael. Is global inflation or deflation a higher risk looking forward right now?
Is this on? Okay. I think deflation is a greater threat in the global economy right now. I mean, it depends how you look at the world, right? I look at the world in dollars, and with everybody devaluing, it's telling me that you're importing deflation to the United States. Now, the rest of the world is trying to generate growth through lower prices, and that's going to generate inflation for them. But I think on a global basis, labor is getting cheaper everywhere on the planet. Commodities are getting cheaper everywhere on the planet. And so the risk is more from a deflationary pressure, especially on businesses that think in dollars, which is multinational corporations, and especially people who borrowed in dollars, which is the risk in the system, is that you borrowed in dollars and you have to pay back in dollars. And I think deflation is keeping that risk there, because if you earn less and less, then your ability to pay back is lower and lower. I think that because of this, people are going to remain in a risk-off kind of acquiring of debt position for a while. And that's an advantage to those that have capital and can put it to work, because there's less competition.
Okay, this question is for kind of both of you guys, because I think it certainly pertains to both the international and domestic economies. Are you concerned about the debt levels that exist here and the rising debt levels in China, and how do we cope with those? They're in a lot of cases, by a lot of measures, at or approaching pre-recession levels again?
China?
China, well, I don't,
You take China.
all right. So China's simple. There's no such thing as debt in China. All debt in China is owned by the government. The government can do whatever it wants. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Private debt in China, household debt in China, is the lowest anywhere on the planet. It's less than 30% of their GDP. Most debt in China is in the business sector. Well, the business sector belongs to the party and it belongs to the government. So it's really just a matter of how and when the government will bail them out. Right now, state and local governments are being allowed to refinance virtually 100% of their debt into the federal government, which will lower their interest carry by 50%. So I don't really see a debt problem. Their interest rates, their market interest rates, about 4.5%. They could go to zero. And so you can carry a lot of debt if you can keep lowering the interest rates. That's what the Japanese have proved to us. Now, does that mean they should have more debt? No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying I don't see a problem with their debt levels currently.
In terms of the U.S., I mean, Japan's debt to GDP is over 200%, so we've got a ways to go before we catch up to them. I think I'm more concerned about the long run. Currently, the current debt to GDP ratio is, somewhere around 70, 75%. I think the problem that, all economists, all policymakers know about is the unfunded liabilities. I mean, if you just think of, where the government spends its money in terms of discretionary or mandatory spending, the mandatory part just keeps going like this, and that's sort of squeezing the discretionary part. So if you like roads and bridges, defense spending, and all those other things, then clearly that suggests that, from a longer-term perspective, you need to slow the growth of mandatory spending. And the long-term debt to GDP ratios, the forecasts don't look very good.
Here's a good one. This is from the audience. From a state policy standpoint, what are the 2 to 3 things our state leaders can do to best stimulate our state's economy in the next 2 to 3 years?
You want me to
Or
take?
or do we even believe in state-stimulated economic growth?
Well, I certainly believe that states have the ability to make conditions better or worse, right? And so I think one of the strengths of Arkansas and what we have seen over time is, yes, we know our state's per capita income is low. We know our educational attainment is low. We know that we don't have the amount of venture capital activity we would like to see. We have gone through and systematically identified all of these kinds of barriers to per capita personal income growth. I know you're going to find this shocking, but I'm going to say that the solution is investment. Are you ready for this? Everybody's laughing. It's investing in the things that we need. We need our workforce, and so we see a lot of effort put into making sure that our workforce is modern, that we have the most computer coders coming out of high school that you can find, because that's an initiative that is taking place. We want to make sure that our students are not needing remediation when they go into college, and that they're ready to be a 21st century workforce. So investing in that education. It's tough to say, but we have to invest in the health care of our people. And so we see all of the discussion around how we do that in this state and how we make sure that our workforce, again, is healthy enough to work will be as well. And then we may have noticed that you have to invest in infrastructure. I've talked a little bit about human capital, but physical capital as well. We know where we have we know where we have deficiencies. We know where we can look forward and see that the spending that was going to have to be done outpaces the spending we're going to want to do. And so every year you let pass without getting a handle on those things makes it just harder and harder down the road. So I would say paying attention to all of those key issues is the way to go.
What about to you guys? What policy specifically would you advocate that we embrace to push growth rates up from the sort of anemic rate we're experiencing?
I think for me, one of the things, as an economist, if you sort of think about what causes economies to grow and prosper over time, it's this idea of new ideas and new technologies and this, innovation. which takes place in a dynamic economy. And one of the things that I think is very distressing is if we look at new business creation, new startups, they have been slowly declining now for 20-some years. So that's kind of the epitome of new ideas and innovation, new ways to do things, new ways to move things, distribute things. So that's one of the areas that I would look at, is how to encourage sort of startups and new technologies and how it's diffused through the economy.
Here's a follow-on question to that, because we're fortunately bucking the trend a little bit in Arkansas in that respect. And the question again is from the audience. Is the growth in CPG-related startups here in Arkansas having much of an economic impact? And how would we project that for the future?
So CPG, consumer packaged goods, for non-acronym loving folks, startups are part of if you think about our ecosystem in Northwest Arkansas, if you think about having Walmart and Tyson and J.B. Hunt at the center of it, if you think about having our supplier community in the next ring, and if you think about all of our services that go around
Or chopped liver down in Little Rock.
And Diller's. If you think about all of these, companies and the trading of talent, the common problems that they face, the challenge of e-commerce, the challenge of meeting the consumer wherever they are and getting them getting the good to them wherever they want it, it's fertile ground for us to have our trained students who are being trained in supply chain management, who are being trained in retail excellence. All of these things provide us with a workforce that is designed to solve these problems. And if we can solve them for our companies, then obviously we're going to solve them for many, many multinational corporations. And so it makes sense to put extra focus on our core competencies, on what we're best at and on what we know something about. And it really has been the story of success in Northwest Arkansas. So when we talk about CPG startups and whether their economic impact is huge, they are a support structure in that overall economic hub that we have here, that cluster of retail innovation, and they are critical to that cluster.
Here's one that I'd like to ask, and I seem like I'm kind of fixated on the debt issue, but as the U.S. consumers, have they delevered enough to have sustained sales growth? Maybe with Franklin McCarty here, do we see car sales being able to stay like at the rates they are, or do they even stay up? What goes on as are they, again, as consumer debt has gone up a little bit, are they at a position to continue? We just talked about 75% of the economy is really consumer-led. There's a divergence between manufacturing. We're really very dependent on consumer-led growth, and can we expect that, I guess, would be the question in a nutshell.
Well, certainly that is the forecast for auto sales this year, next year, is for continued increases. Now, whether that occurs or not, we don't know. But clearly, as long as those key drivers of consumer spending hold up, and I think job growth is certainly one of the number one reasons. I think there's good reason to expect labor compensation, wage growth to pick up as well. And if inflation stays low, interest rates stay low, I see no reason why the consumer will not continue to spend on big ticket items like cars and trucks and refrigerators. And if housing also, there's a lot of knock-on effects from housing, furniture, appliances, things like that.
I think one of the things to understand is that this is the consumer's phase of the cycle. When you get the unemployment rate down to 5%, corporations have to start sharing their profit margin with the best and the brightest if they want to bring them in. And people start to switch jobs. So there's more and more competition for labor. Their ability to collect income goes up. Their desire to spend goes up. Their ability to leverage goes up. Housing, as long as interest rates are not rising rapidly yet, and that usually takes a year or so before it becomes a problem. So household wealth is going up, household income is going up, and that drives the growth in the economy that allows profits to grow even though margins are shrinking. And so aggregate profits hold up and nobody lays off. This is the sweet spot for the economic cycle, and we've just started.
Great, I hope you're right. Here's one, being in an election year, here's one. Is income inequality the most important problem for the U.S. economy? And if so, what do you see as the best way to address it? Anyone? Bueller?
The interesting thing about income inequality is that income inequality is growing in every country on the planet, and it's declining on the planet. So it all depends where you live, because what's happening is we're dispersing growth more and more efficiently through the world. Well, that's not great if you're the middle class, which is the United States, so it's more of a pressure on us. But as we've seen all through the Lehman expansion, that the United States is leading the global recovery. It's not what we've wanted it to be. It's not been as fast as it has been in the past. But it's generated growth not only for the United States, but for a global economy, because the strong dollar and our large trade deficit are exporting growth to the rest of the world. And there are far more people better off in the world today than there ever have been in the past. I have 3 millennial kids, so I'm very worried about their labor market, but I'll tell you, I'm even more worried about world wars, global wars, that kind of thing, and there ain't any. I mean, the number of people being killed through wars in the world is declining, and has declined very rapidly since World War II. And if I have to sacrifice some U.S. growth to have global stability, I'm all for it.
Kevin, any thoughts?
I have no comment.
That one gets too close to home.
Yeah, and I'll just say that, when we're at this part of the cycle, what Michael said is correct. This is the part of the cycle where wages are supposed to grow. So if wages don't grow, then I think, yes, it's going to be very important in the election process. And so that's what we have to be looking for. This is where we are.
All right, guys, thank you so much. That's the last question. I'm going to ask Dean Matt Waller to come back up and close us out. Thank you, guys.
On behalf of the University of Arkansas, I want to thank our panelists and our moderator, Bill Dillard III, for participating in Business Forecast 2016. Bill, Michael, and Kevin, as a token of our appreciation, I would like to present you with an appreciation. In your honor, a $500 scholarship will be presented to a Walton student to defray the costs of studying abroad. This event shows us how important having a global perspective is to all of us, and we're on a mission to provide that to as many of our students as possible. Of course, we also owe Kathy Deck a tremendous amount of thanks. Thank you, Kathy. I would like to quickly recognize the faculty and staff who have worked so many hours on this event. Recognition goes to the Center for Business and Economic Research and the Office of External Affairs and other staff in the Walton College. Those of you in those groups, please stand up. External Affairs, Sieber, thank you. Before we adjourn, let me remind you to fill out the evaluations in your packets, as well as your 2017 forecast entry form. You may leave them both on the table. Thank you so much for coming. We thank you for the support the past 22 years, and we look forward to seeing you at our 23rd annual forecast in 2017. Thank you.